The stagecoach robbery left Clara Whitmore with nothing but the clothes on her back and a desperate need to reach Silver Hollow before nightfall. She'd been traveling to take up a position as the town's new telegraph operator, a job she'd fought hard to secure. One of the few respectable positions open to an unmarried woman without family connections. Now her trunk, her letters of reference, and the small savings she'd carried for emergencies were gone, stolen by 3 masked men who'd left her and the other passengers stranded on a dusty roadside with nothing but fear and the setting sun for company. By the time she finally stumbled into Silver Hollow on foot, blistered and exhausted, the town saloon was the only building still showing light. "We're closing up," said the man behind the bar, not looking up from where he was counting the night's earnings. He was broad-shouldered, sleeves rolled to reveal forearms marked with old scars, dark hair falling loose over a face that looked like it hadn't quite decided whether to trust the world or not. "I don't need a drink," Clara said, voice hoarse from hours of walking. "I need help. My stagecoach was robbed on the Cutters Pass Road. I'm the new telegraph operator, meant to arrive hours ago." The man finally looked up, and something in his sharp assessment of her, torn hem, dust-streaked face, trembling hands, shifted his expression from irritation into something more careful. "Nobody's expecting a telegraph operator tonight," he said. "Office has been shuttered 2 weeks now, waiting on someone to fill the post." He set down his ledger. "You're saying you walked from Cutters Pass? That's near 8 miles. "I didn't have much choice," Clara said, swaying slightly on her feet. He was around the bar before she fully registered him moving, a steadying hand catching her elbow before her knees could properly buckle. "Sit," he said, guiding her to the nearest chair with more gentleness than his gruff manner suggested he possessed. "Name's Jack Calloway. I own this place, for what that's worth to you right now." "Clara Whitmore," she managed, gratefully accepting the water he pressed into her hands moments later. "Sheriff's out of town till Thursday," Jack said, watching her drink with careful attention. "Robbery like that needs reporting properly, but it'll have to wait till morning at earliest. Tonight you need food and somewhere safe to sleep, neither of which you'll find easily on Silver Hollow's streets this late alone. I couldn't possibly impose—" "You're not imposing," Jack said, already moving toward the kitchen behind the bar. "You're surviving a rough night in a town that doesn't yet know you're meant to be here. There's a difference, Miss Whitmore, and I don't intend to leave a robbed, exhausted woman wandering my streets, simply because propriety makes you uncomfortable accepting help." Clara watched him disappear into the kitchen, exhaustion and gratitude tangling together as she realized, for the first time since the robbery, that perhaps she hadn't stumbled into complete disaster after all. Jack returned minutes later with a plate of simple food, bread, cold meat, a wedge of cheese, setting it before her without ceremony. "Eat," he said. "Then I'll show you to a room upstairs. Saloon's got a few for traveling guests, though we don't get many this far off the main routes." Clara ate gratefully, the food doing wonders for her frayed nerves. "I don't have money to pay for a room, Mr. Calloway. The robbers took everything." "Didn't ask for payment," Jack said, settling into the chair across from her, studying her with open curiosity now that the immediate crisis had passed. "Telegraph operator, you said? Rather unusual work for a woman traveling alone." "I've operated telegraph lines since I was 16, Clara said, some of her natural pride returning now that food and rest had steadied her. "My father taught me the trade before he passed. I'm rather good at it, actually, whatever assumptions my gender might invite." Something like amusement flickered across Jack's weathered face. "Didn't say I doubted your competence, Miss Whitmore. Silver Hollow's been desperate for a reliable operator since the last one left for Denver 2 months back. Whatever gender manages that competently is fine by me. That's rather more open-minded than most towns I've encountered," Clara admitted, surprised. "Silver Hollow's had to be practical," Jack said. "Small town, limited resources. Can't afford the luxury of turning away. Capable people over old-fashioned notions about who's suited for what work." He studied her a moment longer. "You'll want the telegraph office cleaned properly before you can start work there. Been sitting empty 2 months, likely gathering considerable dust. I can manage that myself, Clara said. Once I've properly rested, and once I've reported the robbery to whoever handles such matters in the sheriff's absence. Deputy Marsh handles minor matters, Jack said. Though robbery on Cutter's Pass Road isn't minor, given how frequently it's happened these past months. You're not the first stagecoach hit out that way recently. Clara's exhaustion sharpened suddenly into concern. There's been a pattern of robberies? For this season alone, Jack said grimly. Same general description each time. 3 riders, careful and organized, striking isolated stretches where help's unlikely to arrive quickly. Sheriff's been investigating. But whoever's responsible knows the terrain considerably better than the law does. The information settled uncomfortably in Clara's chest. The reality of her situation, extending beyond simple bad luck into something more organized and concerning. I don't suppose your telegraph skills extend toward tracking down organized criminals? Jack added, something wry entering his tone. Given how thoroughly Silver Hollow could use competent help on that particular front. I'm afraid my expertise extends only to sending and receiving messages accurately, Clara said, allowing herself a tired smile. Though I imagine reliable telegraph communication might prove rather useful. Coordinating whatever investigation eventually catches these robbers properly. That it might, Jack agreed, something considering in his dark eyes as he studied her with renewed interest. Come on then, Miss Whitmore. Let's get you settled properly for the night. Tomorrow's soon enough to worry over robbers and telegraph offices both. He led her upstairs to a small but clean room, and Clara collapsed gratefully onto the narrow bed, exhaustion finally overtaking the day's considerable trials, though her last waking thought lingered, curiously, on the unexpected kindness of the gruff saloon owner who'd taken in a stranger without hesitation. Morning arrived with sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains, and for a disoriented moment, Clara forgot entirely where she was. Then memory returned, the robbery, the long walk, Jack Calloway's unexpected kindness, and she rose quickly, eager to properly begin the life she'd traveled so far to build. She found Jack downstairs already, wiping down the bar in preparation for the day, though the saloon's early morning quiet felt considerably different from the previous night's tension. Slept well, I hope, he said, nodding toward a plate of breakfast already set aside for her. Better than I expected. Given everything, Clara admitted, accepting the food gratefully. Thank you. Mr. Calloway, genuinely, I'm not certain what I would have done last night without your assistance. Wouldn't have let a robbed traveler wander Silver Hollow's streets regardless of circumstance, Jack said, though something in his tone suggested her gratitude wasn't entirely unwelcome. Deputy Marsh should be at his office by now. If you're wanting to report the robbery properly. Clara nodded, finishing her breakfast quickly, eager to address the practical matters awaiting her. And the telegraph office? You mentioned it needing considerable cleaning. I'll walk you over, Jack offered. Show you where things stand, given you've got no belongings left to properly establish yourself with after those robbers took everything. The walk through Silver Hollow revealed a modest but functional town, general store, blacksmith, small church, the sheriff's office, where Deputy Marsh proved sympathetic, but realistic about the robbery's likely resolution. We'll investigate, Miss Whitmore, Marsh said, taking careful notes. Though I'll be honest, these robberies have proven frustratingly difficult to properly track. Whoever's responsible knows this territory better than my department managers to. Jack mentioned similar concerns, Clara said, glancing toward where Jack waited outside the office, giving her privacy for the official report. Calloway's not wrong about the pattern, Marsh said. 4 robberies this season, always isolated stretches, always careful and organized. We suspect local knowledge is involved somehow, though proving that's proven considerably more difficult than suspecting it. The telegraph office, when they finally reached it, proved exactly as dusty and neglected as Jack had warned. 2 months of abandonment evident in every corner. I can manage this, Clara said, surveying the considerable cleaning required with the same determination that had carried her through the previous night's ordeal. Though I confess, without proper supplies or belongings, Establishing myself here will take rather longer than I originally anticipated. Silver Hollow takes care of its own, Jack said, something unexpectedly warm in his gruff voice. Whatever you need to get properly established, town will help provide. We're rather desperate for reliable telegraph service, given how isolated we've been these past 2 months without it. Clara studied him carefully, curious about the layers beneath his gruff exterior. You seem rather invested in Silver Hollow's welfare. Mr. Calloway, beyond simply running a saloon, something guarded flickered behind his dark eyes. This town gave me a fresh start once, some years back, when I needed it rather desperately myself. I don't forget debts like that easily, Miss Whitmore, whatever gruffness you might otherwise perceive in my manner. Before Clara could ask what exactly that fresh start had involved, Jack had already turned toward practical matters, helping her assess the telegraph equipment's condition, the moment of vulnerability closing as quickly as it had opened, though Clara found herself increasingly curious about the careful mysteries this gruff, unexpectedly kind saloon owner seemed to be guarding so closely. Over the following days, Silver Hollow proved exactly as generous as Jack had promised. The general store owner extended credit for basic supplies. Several townswomen arrived with donated clothing and household items, and by the end of the first week, Clara had the telegraph office running properly, messages flowing steadily between Silver Hollow and the wider territory once more. Jack remained a constant, if carefully measured, presence throughout, checking in most mornings before her shift began, occasionally walking her home after late evening messages required attention, always maintaining a careful distance that Clara found herself curiously eager to close. "You didn't have to walk me home again," she said one evening, the two of them making their way along Silver Hollow's quiet main street beneath a canopy of stars. Given the robberies still unsolved on the outskirts, seemed prudent, Jack said, though something in his tone suggested the walks meant rather more to him than simple prudence alone. Can't have Silver, Hollow's only telegraph operator, falling victim to whatever's been plaguing our roads these past months. That's rather thoughtful of you, Clara said. Beyond simple town welfare concerns. Jack was quiet a moment, something considering in his expression as they walked. I'll admit, Miss Whitmore, your company's proven rather more pleasant than I anticipated. That first uncertain night you arrived, warmth crept up Clara's neck at the admission. I could say the same, Mr. Calloway, though I confess I remain rather curious about the mysteries you seem determined to guard so carefully. Everyone carries history they'd rather not examine too closely, Jack said, old guardedness returning to his voice. I understand that, Clara said gently. I simply find myself wondering whether you might trust me enough, eventually, to share some of that history properly. Jack studied her for a long moment beneath the starlight, something vulnerable flickering behind his careful composure before he finally spoke. I came to Silver Hollow 6 years back, running from considerable trouble in Kansas. Cattle rustling accusations, some justified, some not. Complicated enough that explaining properly would take more than a single evening's walk. His jaw tightened. Sheriff here gave me a chance nobody else would back then. Let me build an honest life running this saloon, rather than simply arresting me on accusations that weren't entirely fair to begin with. Clara absorbed this carefully, understanding dawning about the careful guardedness she'd noticed since their first meeting. That explains your investment in Silver Hollow's welfare, and perhaps your particular sympathy toward someone arriving here in difficult circumstances herself. Perhaps, Jack admitted. Though I'll confess, Miss Whitmore, my interest in your welfare extends rather beyond simple sympathy for shared, difficult circumstances. Clara's breath caught at the admission, something warm and hopeful building in her chest. Is that so, Mr. Calloway? It is, Jack said, stopping their walk entirely, turning to face her properly beneath the star-scattered sky. I find myself rather more invested in your continued presence here than professional courtesy alone would explain. The moment stretched between them, charged and uncertain, until the distant sound of hoofbeats, approaching fast down the main street, shattered the tension entirely. Both of them turning sharply toward the sound, instinct sharpening immediately given Silver. Hollow's recent troubles with organized robbery on its outskirts. The rider turned out to be Deputy Marsh, dismounting hastily outside the sheriff's office, his expression grim enough that Jack immediately abandoned their private conversation, moving toward him with sharp concern. "Marsh, what's happened?" "Another robbery," Marsh said, breathless from hard riding. "Cutter's Pass again, not 2 hours back. But this one's different. They hit the mail wagon this time, not just passengers. Federal Mail, Callaway. That's considerably more serious than robbing stagecoach travelers." Clara's stomach tightened with unease. Federal involvement means considerably more scrutiny on Silver Hollow, doesn't it? Given how frequently these robberies have occurred on roads leading directly to our town. "Exactly the concern," Marsh said grimly. "Territorial marshals being notified first thing tomorrow. They'll want answers considerably faster than I've managed to provide these past months." Jack's expression had shifted into something carefully unreadable, old caution evident beneath his concern for the town's welfare. "Any leads at all, Marsh? Federal involvement usually means considerable pressure to find someone responsible quickly, whether or not the investigation's actually solid." "Driver survived, gave a partial description," Marsh said. "Says one of the robbers wore a distinctive scarred hand, missing part of 2 fingers. Recognized it clear enough during the robbery to mention specifically." Something flickered across Jack's face, quick and carefully masked, though Clara caught it regardless, curious about whatever recognition had briefly crossed his expression. "That's helpful at least," Jack said, voice carefully neutral. "Should narrow things considerably. If anyone local matches that particular description." Marsh nodded, already turning back toward his office. "I'll need proper telegraph service tomorrow morning, Miss Whitmore, coordinating with the Territorial Marshal's office. This investigation's about to become rather more involved than anything. Silver Hollow's managed handling. Alone thus far." "Of course," Clara said. "I'll have the office open early." Once Marsh had departed, Clara studied Jack carefully, curious about the flicker of recognition she'd witnessed. "You know something about that description, don't you? The scarred hand." Jack's jaw tightened, old guardedness returning sharply. "Can't say for certain. Plenty of men carry old scars. Working cattle and rough terrain like this territory demands." "Jack," Clara said gently, using his given name for the first time, "if you know something relevant to these robberies, Silver Hollow's welfare rather depends on you sharing it, regardless of whatever complicated history might make that difficult." Something conflicted crossed his weathered features, old loyalty warring visibly against present responsibility. "There's a man," he said finally, voice low and careful, "worked cattle alongside me back in Kansas before I came here. Fellow named Dean Pruitt carries exactly that kind of scarring on his right hand, from an old branding accident. Haven't seen him in years, but if he's turned toward robbery since then." "You think he might be involved in these robberies?" Clara said carefully. "I think," Jack said grimly, "that if Dean Pruitt's operating anywhere near Silver Hollow, considerable danger might be heading this town's way, regardless of whatever fresh start I believe myself building here these past 6 years." The revelation hung heavy between them, transforming their earlier charged, hopeful moment into something considerably more urgent and uncertain. Clara recognizing immediately that whatever growing feelings had begun building between them now faced complications neither of them had anticipated when the evening began. Morning brought considerable tension to Silver Hollow, word of the Federal Mail robbery spreading quickly through town, anxious speculation, filling every conversation Clara overheard while opening the telegraph office. Jack arrived shortly after her, expression carefully composed, but evidently troubled beneath his usual guardedness. "I spoke with Marsh again this morning," he said, without preamble. "Told him what I suspected about Dean Pruitt's possible involvement." "That must have been difficult," Clara said gently, "given your history alongside him." "Difficult but necessary," Jack said. "Whatever loyalty I once carried toward old associates matters considerably less than Silver Hollow's safety now. If Dean's genuinely responsible for these robberies, he needs stopping, regardless of whatever complicated history connects us." Clara's telegraph key began clicking insistently just then, An incoming message from the Territorial Marshal's office requesting immediate confirmation of local intelligence regarding the robbery pattern. She worked quickly, relaying Jack's information about Dean Pruitt's possible identity, the Marshal's response arriving within minutes, requesting Jack's presence at the sheriff's office for formal questioning. Jack studied her with unexpected gratitude. "That's kind of you, Clara, given how complicated my history's proving to be. Your history doesn't concern me the way you might expect," Clara said carefully. "Whatever mistakes or associations you carried from Kansas, you've clearly built something honest here since. That matters considerably more to me than old complications you're actively working to resolve." Something warm flickered behind Jack's guarded expression at her words, though the pressing urgency of the investigation prevented him from responding properly before Marsh arrived, requesting his immediate presence for formal questioning. The questioning proved extensive, Jack providing detailed information about Dean Pruitt's background, his known associates, the particular skills and terrain knowledge that might explain the robber's evident sophistication. Clara assisted where possible, coordinating telegraph communication with the Territorial Marshal's office, watching Jack navigate difficult questions about his own complicated Kansas history with a careful honesty that only deepened her growing admiration for him. "You've been remarkably forthcoming, Mr. Calloway," the Marshal observed, once the formal questioning concluded. "Most men wouldn't volunteer information, potentially implicating old associates so readily." "Silver Hollow's welfare matters more to me than old loyalty," Jack said simply. "Whatever mistakes I made in Kansas, I've spent 6 years trying to build something better here. I won't let complicated history from my past endanger. Though they'll want to know everything," Jack said grimly, watching the message transcribe. "My full history with Dean, whatever connection might exist between us that could explain his presence near Silver Hollow specifically. I'll accompany you if that would help," Clara offered. "Having someone present who understands the telegraph communications might prove useful, coordinating between local and territorial investigation." "Town that gave me that chance." The Marshal nodded, evident respect in his expression. "We'll need you available for further questioning as the investigation develops. Mr. Calloway, in the meantime, I'd recommend considerable caution. If Pruitt recognizes you're assisting this investigation, he may consider you a direct threat requiring elimination." The warning settled uncomfortably over the room, Clara's stomach tightening with fresh worry as she realized exactly how much danger Jack might now be facing, simply for choosing honesty over old loyalty, during an investigation that suddenly felt considerably more personally threatening than either of them had anticipated when the robberies first began troubling Silver Hollow's roads. The days following Jack's formal questioning brought a watchful tension to Silver Hollow, Marsh assigning additional patrols near the saloon given the Marshal's warning about potential retaliation, while Clara found herself increasingly anxious every time Jack stepped outside without immediate company. "You don't need to worry so thoroughly," Jack said one evening, noticing her tension as he closed up the saloon for the night. "I've handled dangerous situations before, Clara. I'm not entirely defenseless. That doesn't make watching you walk into potential danger any easier," Clara said, surprising herself with the honesty of the admission. "These past weeks, Jack, I've come to care about your welfare rather more than professional acquaintance alone would explain." Jack went very still, something hopeful and cautious crossing his weathered features. "Is that so, Miss Whitmore?" "It is," Clara said, echoing his own earlier admission with matching vulnerability. "Whatever complicated danger this investigation's brought, I find myself considerably more invested in your safety than I anticipated feeling for anyone." This soon after arriving in Silver Hollow, something in Jack's careful composure finally broke, warmth and relief mixing plainly across his features as he closed the distance between them. "I've felt the same, Clara. Since nearly that first night you arrived, exhausted and robbed and entirely unwilling to simply accept help gracefully." "I accepted your help eventually," Clara said, allowing herself a small smile despite the tension surrounding them. Eventually, Jack agreed, reaching to gently brush a strand of hair from her face. Though I confess, watching you settle so thoroughly into Silver Hollow these past weeks, becoming essential to this town's communication and welfare both, I found myself considerably more invested in your continued presence here than I anticipated feeling for anyone. Given how carefully I've guarded myself since arriving here myself 6 years back, the kiss that followed felt inevitable. Weeks of careful tension and growing affection, finally given voice despite the danger still looming over Silver Hollow's investigation, both of them momentarily forgetting Dean. Pruitt's potential threat in favor of the warmth building steadily between them. They broke apart eventually, breathless, the reality of ongoing danger reasserting itself despite the tenderness of the moment. I won't pretend this complicates matters somewhat, Jack said, though genuine happiness colored his voice despite the acknowledgement. Caring for you this deeply, while Dean Pruitt remains at large and potentially targeting anyone connected to this investigation. I'd rather face complicated danger alongside genuine feeling, Clara said firmly, than remain safely uncertain about what's actually growing between us. Jack, whatever risk this investigation carries, I don't intend to let fear prevent me from acknowledging what I feel for you. Jack studied her with evident admiration. You're remarkably brave, Clara Whitmore. Rather more than most people manage, facing genuine danger with such steady determination. I've simply learned, Clara said softly, that avoiding difficult truths rarely protects anyone properly, in my experience. Better to face danger honestly, alongside people we've chosen to trust, than pretend circumstances are simpler than they actually are. The conversation was interrupted by Marsh's urgent knock at the saloon door, his expression grave enough that both Clara and Jack immediately recognized fresh trouble had arrived. We've spotted him, Marsh said without preamble. Dean Pruitt camped roughly 3 miles outside town, alongside what appears to be at least 2 accomplices. Marshall's assembling a proper posse for tomorrow morning, but I wanted you both warned immediately, given the direct threat this represents. The posse assembled at dawn, Marsh coordinating with the territorial marshal's deputies while Jack, despite Clara's evident worry, insisted on joining given his first-hand knowledge of Dean Pruitt's likely tactics and terrain preferences. I need to be there, Jack said, checking his rifle with steady, practiced hands. I know how Dean thinks, how he'll likely position his men given the terrain out toward Cutter's Pass. That knowledge might mean the difference between this operation succeeding cleanly or turning considerably more dangerous than necessary. I understand why you feel obligated, Clara said, fear evident beneath her carefully controlled voice. But Jack, please be careful. Whatever history connects you to Dean Pruitt, I need you returning safely from this. I intend to, Jack said, pressing a fierce, brief kiss to her forehead before joining the assembled posse. I've got considerable reason now, Clara, to ensure I return safely to Silver Hollow. The waiting proved agonizing, Clara attempting to focus on telegraph duties throughout the morning while her attention remained fixed on the distant road where the posse had departed hours before. Word arrived periodically through returning messengers. The posse had located Pruitt's camp, engaged in careful negotiation, attempting to avoid unnecessary violence. Though tension remained high given the desperate nature of cornered criminals, it was nearly noon when the sound of returning riders finally reached Silver Hollow. Clara, abandoning her telegraph post entirely, rushing toward the main street where the posse was returning, relief flooding through her at the sight of Jack among the returning riders, though his posture carried evident exhaustion and tension.
Jack!
She called, rushing toward him as he dismounted. It's done, he said, catching her in a fierce embrace despite the watching crowd. Dean surrendered once he realized how thoroughly outnumbered his position had become. 2 accomplices captured alongside him, considerable stolen goods recovered from their camp. You're not hurt? Clara asked, checking him over with evident worry. Not seriously, Jack said, though a bandaged forearm suggested the operation hadn't proceeded entirely without incident. Dean's man got a shot off before proper surrender, grazed my arm slightly. Nothing serious, Clara, I promise you. Marsh approached then, expression carrying evident satisfaction despite the operation's tension. Couldn't have managed this cleanly without Calloway's knowledge of Pruitt's likely tactics. Territorial Marshal's rather impressed, actually, given how thoroughly this resolves months of unsolved robbery. "I'm simply relieved it's resolved," Jack said, though his attention remained fixed on Clara throughout the exchange. Silver Hollow's safety mattered considerably, more to me than any complicated history connecting me to Dean's eventual capture. That evening, once the considerable excitement had finally settled and Jack's minor wound had been properly treated, Clara found herself sitting beside him on the saloon's back porch, grateful beyond measure for his safe return from what could have proven considerably more dangerous than it ultimately had. "I was terrified," she admitted, "watching you ride off this morning, uncertain whether you'd return safely." "I know," Jack said gently. "I felt the same uncertainty myself, honestly, though determination to protect Silver Hollow and return safely to you both proved rather motivating throughout the operation." "Rather motivating," Clara repeated, smiling despite the day's considerable tension. "That's one way of describing risking your life for this town's safety." "Jack Calloway." "Perhaps," Jack said, reaching for her hand, "though I found myself considerably more motivated by returning safely to whatever future we're building together than simple civic duty alone might explain." The weeks following Dean Pruitt's capture brought a welcome return to normalcy in Silver Hollow, the telegraph office humming with regular business, Jack's saloon returning to its usual evening rhythm, though something had fundamentally shifted between Clara and Jack that neither of them attempted to disguise any longer. "The whole town's noticed. You realize," said Mrs. Abbott, the general store owner, during one of Clara's supply visits, a knowing smile evident despite her attempt at casual conversation. "You and Calloway walking together most evenings, considerable warmth evident whenever you're in each other's company." "I suppose subtlety was never our particular strength," Clara admitted, warmth creeping into her cheeks despite herself. "Silver Hollow's rather pleased about it, actually," Mrs. Abbott said. "Jack's carried himself with considerable guardedness since arriving here 6 years back. Watching him finally open up properly, particularly towards someone as capable and genuine as yourself, brings the whole town considerable satisfaction." The observation stayed with Clara throughout the day, and that evening, walking with Jack towards Cedar Ridge Overlook, a spot he'd recently begun favoring for their evening walks, offering sweeping views of the whole Silver Hollow Valley, she found herself reflecting on how thoroughly her circumstances had transformed since that first desperate night. "I keep thinking," she said, settling onto a large, flat rock overlooking the valley, about how different everything felt. Arriving here robbed and exhausted, uncertain what awaited me in this town. "And now?" Jack asked, settling beside her. "Now I can hardly imagine my life unfolding anywhere else," Clara admitted. "Silver Hollow's become genuinely essential to me. Jack, not simply the telegraph position, but the town itself, the people, and most particularly you." Jack studied her with evident warmth in the fading evening light. "I feel precisely the same. Clara, 6 years I spent here, believing myself content with the fresh start Silver Hollow offered, never quite realizing how much genuine happiness I'd been denying myself, until you arrived and rather thoroughly disrupted my careful, solitary existence." "Disrupted rather favorably, I hope," Clara said, smiling. "Immeasurably favorably," Jack confirmed, reaching for her hand. "I find myself considering questions these past weeks that I genuinely believe myself finished considering, given my complicated Kansas history and the careful solitude I'd built here since." "What sort of questions?" Clara asked, though something in his tone suggested she already suspected the answer. "Questions about permanence," Jack said carefully. "About building something considerably more lasting than simple courtship, given how thoroughly you've come to matter to me these past weeks." He paused, evident nervousness beneath his careful composure. "I'm not quite ready to ask the question properly, Clara, given how recently the Pruitt situation resolved and how important it feels. Taking proper time to build our foundation thoroughly." But I wanted you to understand my intentions clearly, regardless of when I eventually manage asking properly. Clara's chest filled with warm emotion at the careful honesty of the admission. I appreciate that clarity, Jack, and I'll confess, I find myself hoping for exactly that eventual question, whenever you feel genuinely ready to ask it properly. They sat together watching the sunset paint. Silver Hollow's valley in brilliant gold and amber, both grateful for a partnership that had emerged from crisis and danger into something considerably more permanent and hopeful than either had anticipated when Clara first stumbled into town, robbed and exhausted, seeking nothing more than a steady position and a fresh start. October brought the annual Silver Hollow Harvest Festival, the whole town gathering for a celebration that marked, Clara learned, one of the community's most cherished traditions, a chance to properly celebrate the season's successful harvest, alongside considerable food, music, and dancing that drew participants from surrounding ranches and homesteads as well. You'll want a proper dress for the occasion, Mrs. Abbott informed her, several weeks before the festival, already measuring fabric with practiced efficiency. Whole town turns out, Miss Whitmore, and given how thoroughly you've become part of Silver Hollow these past months, you'll want to look the part properly. The festival itself proved everything. Mrs. Abbott had promised tables laden with food, contributed by nearly every household, a small band providing lively music for dancing, children running between adults with barely contained excitement. The whole town gathered in genuine celebration. Jack found her early in the evening, looking considerably more formal than his usual saloon attire, something evidently nervous beneath his careful composure. "You look lovely," he said, offering his arm. "Rather more lovely than the exhausted Rob Traveller who stumbled into my saloon those months back." "I should hope so," Clara said, laughing, accepting his arm gratefully. "I've had considerably more time to properly prepare this occasion." They danced through several songs, Jack proving surprisingly capable despite his gruff exterior, the evening carrying a warmth and joy that felt to Clara like proper celebration not merely of the harvest, but of everything she'd built in Silver Hollow these past months. It was during a quieter moment, the two of them stepping away from the main festivities toward the edge of the gathering, that Jack's earlier nervousness finally revealed its purpose. "Clara," he said, stopping their walk entirely, turning to face her properly beneath the string of lanterns illuminating the festival grounds. "I mentioned some weeks back that I wasn't quite ready to ask a particular question properly. I find myself considerably more ready now, given everything we've built together these past months." Clara's breath caught, understanding immediately what was coming. "Jack!" "Let me finish, please," he said, something endearingly nervous beneath his usual steady composure. "I came to Silver Hollow 6 years ago, believing myself finished with genuine hope for happiness, carrying considerable guilt over my complicated Kansas history. You arrived here months back, robbed and exhausted, and somehow, in the span of a single season, taught me that genuine happiness remained possible, that building an honest life here could extend beyond simple survival into something considerably more meaningful." He knelt properly then, producing a small ring that caught the lantern light. "Clara Whitmore, will you marry me? Build a genuine life together here in Silver Hollow, the town that gave us both fresh starts we scarcely believed ourselves deserving of." Clara's eyes filled with grateful tears, the festival's music and laughter fading into background noise against the significance of the moment. "Yes," she said, laughing through her emotion. "Of course it's yes, Jack Calloway." He rose to kiss her properly then, the nearby festival-goers who'd noticed the proposal breaking into spontaneous applause, Mrs. Abbott dabbing enthusiastically at her own eyes nearby. The whole town seemingly delighted to witness this particular culmination of a courtship they'd watched unfold with evident approval these past months. "I love you," Jack murmured against her hair, once the celebratory applause had settled. "More than I properly know how to express, Clara." "I love you too," Clara said softly. "More than I ever anticipated finding, arriving here that first desperate night." News of the engagement spread through Silver Hollow with predictable speed. the whole town seemingly invested in celebrating alongside them, though Clara found herself amid the joy, increasingly aware of one significant absence. She had no family remaining to properly share this happiness with. Her parents both passed years before, no siblings or close relatives to invite toward the upcoming wedding. "You've gone quiet," Jack observed one evening, noticing her contemplative mood as they reviewed wedding preparations together. "I was simply thinking," Clara admitted, "about how different this celebration feels, having no family remaining to properly share it with. I've grown accustomed to managing alone these past years, since my parents passed. But weddings rather highlight that particular absence more than usual circumstances." Jack's expression softened with understanding. "Silver Hollow's become your family. Clara, whatever blood relations you're missing, this town's embraced you as thoroughly as any family might." "I know that," Clara said, "and I'm genuinely grateful for it. It simply feels different somehow from actual blood family sharing in such significant moments." Jack considered this carefully. "Do you have any distant relations at all?" "Cousins, perhaps, even if relationships grown distant over the years." Clara thought carefully. "There's my mother's sister, actually. Aunt Louisa, though we haven't corresponded in years, since before my parents passed. She lives somewhere in Ohio, last I knew, though I've no idea whether she'd even want reconnection after such prolonged silence." "Perhaps it's worth attempting," Jack suggested gently. "Given how thoroughly you're building new family here in Silver Hollow, perhaps there's room for reconnecting old family ties as well, before the wedding provides proper occasion for such reconciliation." Clara considered this, uncertain hope building despite years of careful distance from that particular branch of her family. "I suppose it couldn't hurt attempting reconnection. Though I confess, I've no idea whether Aunt Louisa would welcome such contact after so many years of silence." She penned a careful letter that evening, explaining her circumstances, the telegraph position, the engagement, her hope that despite years of distance, perhaps reconciliation and reconnection remained possible before her upcoming wedding. The response, when it finally arrived 3 weeks later, proved considerably warmer than Clara had anticipated. "My dear Clara," the letter read, "I confess considerable surprise receiving your letter, though genuine joy as well. Your mother and I had our own complicated history. Disagreements that seemed significant at the time, but appear from this distance rather foolish compared to family connection's actual value. I would be honored to attend your wedding and perhaps begin properly reconnecting with the niece. I've missed knowing these past years." Clara read the letter several times, tears of relief and joy mixing freely, grateful beyond measure that her tentative reaching toward reconciliation had proven so warmly received. "She's coming," she told Jack that evening, showing him the letter.
"Aunt Louisa's actually coming."
"Jack, I'll have family present at the wedding after all." "I'm genuinely pleased," Jack said, embracing her warmly. "Family reconciliation seems a fitting way to properly celebrate the new family we're building together, Clara." Aunt Louisa arrived by train 2 weeks before the wedding, a warm, energetic woman whose immediate embrace of Clara carried none of the awkward distance Clara had anticipated after years of silence. "You favor your mother considerably," Louisa observed, studying Clara with evident affection during their first proper visit. "The same steady determination in your bearing, though I suspect you've had rather more occasion to develop it, given everything you've navigated these past months." "It's been considerable adjustment," Clara admitted, "though Silver Hollow's proven remarkably welcoming, given the circumstances of my arrival." "I understand you were robbed, traveling here initially," Louisa said, concern evident. "That must have been terrifying." "Arriving in unfamiliar territory with nothing but the clothes on your back." Jack helped considerably. "That first night," Clara said, warmth entering her voice at the memory. "I'm not certain what I would have managed without his assistance." Louisa's expression turned knowing. "I understand from your letter that Jack's rather more than simple assistance now, given the upcoming wedding." Clara laughed, warmth spreading through her chest. "Considerably more, yes. Though I confess, arriving here robbed and exhausted, I never anticipated finding genuine partnership and love in Silver Hollow, of all places." Life carries unexpected turns, Louisa said wisely. Your mother always said the same, actually, about circumstances that initially seemed disastrous eventually, revealing themselves as genuine blessings. Given proper perspective and time, the observation resonated deeply, and over the following days, Clara found herself increasingly grateful for Louisa's presence, not merely as family reconnection, but as genuine friendship. Her aunt proving remarkably supportive throughout the final wedding preparations, sharing stories about Clara's mother that helped fill gaps in Clara's understanding of family history she'd never properly explored. Your mother would be so proud, Louisa said. During one particularly emotional conversation, watching you build this life here, Clara, genuine happiness, hard-won through difficulty rather than simple inheritance or easy circumstance. I wish she could see it properly, Clara said, old grief mixing with genuine gratitude for the reconciliation Louisa's presence represented. Perhaps she does, in whatever way such things work, Louisa said gently, echoing sentiments Clara had heard expressed in different circumstances, different stories, though the universal comfort of the thought remained genuinely meaningful regardless. Jack, watching this reconciliation unfold with evident warmth, found himself increasingly moved by Clara's capacity to build genuine connection, not merely with him, but with family history she'd believed permanently distant, community that had initially been strangers, an entire life constructed from circumstances that had begun in genuine crisis and robbery. You've built something remarkable here, he told her privately, family and community both, from what began as considerable disaster. We've built it together, Clara corrected gently. Whatever foundation I managed constructing, your partnership and Silver Hollow's genuine welcome made everything considerably more possible than I could have managed achieving alone. The wedding morning dawned clear and bright, Silver Hollow's autumn colors, providing a stunning backdrop for the ceremony planned at the town's small church, the whole community gathering to witness a union that had grown from crisis into genuine, hard-won happiness. Clara dressed carefully in the ivory gown Louisa had helped select, her aunt's careful attention lending the morning a warmth that helped ease the last of Clara's nervous anticipation. Your mother's pearl earrings, Louisa said, presenting a small velvet box Clara hadn't expected. I kept them safe all these years, uncertain whether I'd ever have proper occasion to return them to you. Seems entirely fitting given the occasion. Clara's eyes filled with grateful tears, accepting the earrings with trembling hands. Thank you, Louisa, genuinely. Having something of my mother's present for this particular day means more than I can properly express. She's here in spirit, regardless, Louisa said gently. Watching you build this happiness, exactly as I suspect she'd hoped for you, given everything you've navigated these past years alone. The walk to the church felt like culmination of everything Clara had built since that first desperate night, not merely a wedding, but genuine vindication of every difficult choice, every moment of stubborn determination that had carried her, from robbery and uncertainty, into this golden autumn morning, surrounded by community and reconnected family finally, genuinely embracing her as one of their own. Jack waited at the altar, his expression carrying the same raw wonder she'd witnessed only rarely these past months, moments too significant for his usual careful composure to fully contain. The ceremony itself proceeded with the particular warmth of a community genuinely invested in celebrating this union, the minister guiding them through vows that felt considerably more meaningful, given everything that had preceded this moment, the desperate first meeting, the slow-building partnership, the shared danger of Dean Pruitt's capture, the careful reconciliation with distant family finally reconnected. Clara Whitmore, Jack said, his voice carrying clearly through the small church. You arrived in Silver Hollow believing yourself facing complete disaster, robbed and exhausted, uncertain what awaited you in unfamiliar territory. You leave this ceremony, my wife, having taught me that genuine happiness remained possible, regardless of complicated history or careful guardedness either of us carried into this partnership. Clara's own vows carried the weight of everything she'd learned. These past months about resilience, about building genuine connection from crisis, about the particular grace of communities and people willing to offer fresh starts to those brave enough to accept them. I came to Silver Hollow believing I'd simply be establishing a telegraph position, she said, voice thick with emotion. I never expected to find an entire life waiting here. Genuine partnership, reconnected family, a community that embraced me as thoroughly as any blood relation might. Jack Calloway, you've given me not merely marriage, but proof that even disaster can transform into genuine blessing, given proper courage and willingness to accept help when circumstances demand it. When the minister finally pronounced them married, the small church erupted into genuine celebration, the whole community rising to applaud a union they'd watched develop with evident approval throughout the preceding months. The wedding celebration continued well into the evening at Jack's saloon, transformed for the occasion with considerable decoration and the whole town's genuine enthusiasm, music and laughter filling the space that had first offered Clara refuge those many months before. It feels rather fitting, Clara observed, watching the celebration unfold around them, celebrating here, in the very place you first offered me shelter that desperate first night. I thought the same, Jack admitted, settling beside her at their small table of honor. This saloon's witnessed considerable transformation these past months, alongside our own relationship's development. Louisa approached, evident joy on her face as she embraced them both. I'm so genuinely happy for you both, watching this celebration. I find myself grateful beyond measure that you reached out for reconciliation. Clara, allowing me the privilege of witnessing this happiness properly. I'm equally grateful, Clara said, that you responded so warmly, despite years of unfortunate distance. As the evening progressed, Marsh approached with news that provided fitting closure to the danger that had complicated their courtship months before. Dean Pruitt's trial concluded properly, he reported. Convicted on all counts, sentenced to considerable time in territorial prison. Silver Hollow's roads should remain safe going forward, given his organization's complete dismantling. That's tremendous relief, Jack said, genuine satisfaction evident. Proper resolution, allowing us to build our future here without lingering concern about his eventual release or retaliation. Silver Hollow owes you both considerable gratitude, Marsh added. Your cooperation throughout the investigation, Jack, alongside Clara's telegraph coordination, proved genuinely instrumental in resolving months of dangerous uncertainty. The evening continued with dancing, toasts, and the particular warmth of a community celebrating not merely a wedding, but the resolution of danger that had threatened their collective safety, transformed instead into genuine triumph and joy. Later, as the celebration finally began winding down, Jack and Clara stepped outside briefly, seeking a quiet moment beneath the star-scattered Wyoming sky that had witnessed so much of their courtship's development. Do you remember, Clara said softly, standing right here that very first night, uncertain whether stumbling into Silver Hollow represented disaster or unexpected fortune? I remember, Jack said, smiling at the memory. You were entirely certain you couldn't possibly impose on my hospitality, despite being robbed, exhausted, and having nowhere else to turn. I was wrong about that, rather significantly, Clara laughed. Though I suppose that particular mistake led directly toward everything we've built together since. Sometimes, Jack said, pressing a soft kiss to her temple, our greatest disasters transform into our most significant blessings, given proper courage to accept help and build genuine connection from crisis. They stood together beneath the star-filled sky, grateful beyond measure for a partnership built from crisis and danger into something considerably more permanent and joyful than either had anticipated when Clara first stumbled into Silver Hollow that desperate autumn evening. Winter settled over Silver Hollow within weeks of the wedding, the first proper snow transforming the valley into pristine white. And with the quieter pace of the season came the gradual settling of married, Life that felt to Clara remarkably natural given how recently she'd arrived as a complete stranger to both the town and to Jack himself. The telegraph office remained busy despite winter's typical slowdown. Silver Hollow's growing reputation as a properly connected town, drawing increased business. Correspondents from surrounding ranches and homesteads eager for reliable communication with the wider territory. Business has grown considerably, Clara observed one evening, reviewing the month's telegraph logs with evident satisfaction. Nearly double what I managed handling those first weeks, before the town properly trusted the service's reliability. You've built something genuinely valuable here, Jack said, pride evident in his voice. Silver Hollow's considerably better connected now than before your arrival. Clara, that matters more than I think you properly appreciate, given how isolated this territory can feel without reliable communication. Their partnership had settled into comfortable rhythm, Jack managing the saloon with practiced ease, Clara handling telegraph duties, alongside increasing involvement in the saloon's own bookkeeping, both of them finding genuine satisfaction in building something lasting together, distinct from the crisis and danger that had initially brought them together. It was during a particularly quiet evening, snow falling steadily outside while they reviewed accounts together by lamplight, that an unexpected visitor arrived, a weathered older man, clearly having traveled considerable distance given his exhausted appearance and snow-covered coat. I'm looking for Jack Calloway, the man said, once Jack had admitted him into the warm saloon. You found him, Jack said carefully, old wariness evident given recent complicated history with unexpected visitors. What business brings you to Silver Hollow this time of year? Name's Everett Hayes, the man said. I knew your father some years back before you left Kansas. Came considerable distance specifically seeking you out. Given some rather significant news, I felt obligated delivering personally. Jack went very still, old complicated history evidently resurfacing at the mention of his father, someone Clara realized he'd never actually mentioned during their courtship, despite considerable conversation about his general Kansas background. My father passed some years back, Jack said carefully. I received that news properly some time ago. I'm aware, Hayes said. This concerns different matter entirely. Your father's estate. Jack, considerable property and holdings that were never properly settled, given the circumstances of your departure from Kansas all those years back. I've spent considerable time tracking you down, specifically to inform you that you're entitled to inheritance you likely never anticipated receiving. The revelation hung heavy in the warm saloon air. Clara, watching Jack's expression carry complicated layers of shock, old grief, and evident uncertainty about what this unexpected inheritance might mean for the careful life they'd built together in Silver Hollow. Once Hayes had been properly settled with food and a room for the night, Jack and Clara retreated upstairs, the unexpected news requiring careful private discussion. You never mentioned inheritance, Clara said gently, watching Jack process the considerable shock still evident in his expression, or much about your father at all, honestly, beyond general Kansas background. There wasn't much worth mentioning, Jack said, old grief coloring his voice. My father and I parted badly before I ever left Kansas. He disapproved considerably of the cattle-rustling accusations, believed I'd brought genuine shame to the family name. Regardless of whether the accusations were entirely fair, he sat heavily on the edge of their bed. We never properly reconciled before he passed. I assumed, given how badly we'd parted, that any inheritance would go entirely to my younger brother instead. Perhaps your father reconsidered eventually, Clara suggested carefully, the way my own family history taught me. Regret often outlasts whatever pride initially caused the rift. Perhaps, Jack said, though uncertainty remained evident. Hayes mentioned considerable property. Clara, a working ranch, sizable acreage, apparently held in trust these past years while attorneys attempted locating me properly. That's significant inheritance, Clara said carefully. What will you do given this news? Jack was quiet a long moment, clearly weighing complicated feelings about a father he'd never reconciled with. A Kansas history he'd spent years attempting to distance himself from, against practical considerations about unexpected wealth and property. "I don't know," he admitted finally. "Part of me wants nothing to do with property connected to such painful history. Another part recognizes practical wisdom in accepting inheritance that might benefit our future considerably, whatever complicated emotion accompanies it." "Whatever you decide," Clara said gently, echoing sentiments once offered in different circumstances, different reconciliations. "I'll support you completely. Jack, this is your history to navigate, on whatever terms feel right to you." Jack studied her with evident gratitude. "That means considerably more than I can properly express, Clara, having your steady support, regardless of how I proceed with this complicated inheritance." Over the following days, Jack corresponded extensively with Hayes and the Kansas attorneys handling his father's estate, gradually working through complicated feelings about accepting inheritance from a father he'd never properly reconciled with. Clara watched this process with careful support, recognizing the parallel to her own family reconciliation months before, understanding intimately how complicated such processes could prove, regardless of eventual resolution. "I've decided," Jack said finally, nearly 2 weeks after Hayes's unexpected arrival. "I'll accept the inheritance, though I don't intend returning to Kansas permanently. The ranch and property I'll likely sell, using proceeds to invest properly in our life here in Silver Hollow, rather than attempting to rebuild connection with a place that carries such complicated, painful history." "That seems wise," Clara said, "honoring whatever reconciliation your father intended, without requiring you to abandon the genuine life we've built here together." "Precisely," Jack agreed. "Silver Hollow's home now. Lara, whatever inheritance Kansas provides, I don't intend letting it complicate the future we're actively building here together." The following months brought considerable practical complexity as Jack worked through the process of properly settling his father's estate from a distance, correspondence flowing steadily between Silver Hollow and Kansas attorneys while he arranged for the ranch's eventual sale. It was during this process that another unexpected element emerged, a letter from Jack's younger brother, Samuel, whom Jack hadn't spoken with in the 8 years since his departure from Kansas. Jack, the letter read, considerably more emotional than the formal attorney correspondence Jack had grown accustomed to receiving. "I understand from the estate attorneys that you've been located, and that father's property rightfully passes partially to you. I confess I'm uncertain how to properly address the considerable distance between us, though I find myself hoping, given this unexpected reconnection, that perhaps we might attempt reconciliation, however overdue that reconciliation might prove." Jack read the letter several times, old complicated grief evident beneath careful composure. "Samuel and I parted almost as badly as father and I did," he told Clara that evening. "He sided with father, believed the rustling accusations more than he believed my innocence. I haven't spoken with him properly in 8 years. Would you like to attempt reconciliation?" Clara asked gently, recognizing familiar territory, given her own experience with estranged family reconnection. "I don't know," Jack admitted. "Part of me remains angry, still, about how quickly he believed the worst of me all those years back. Another part recognizes that we were both considerably younger then, perhaps capable of different understanding now, given proper time and distance. Perhaps," Clara suggested carefully, "there's wisdom in extending the same grace I extended toward my own family when Aunt Louisa's reconciliation letter arrived. Cautious openness, without pretending the past, simply didn't happen." Jack considered this seriously, clearly weighing his own complicated feelings against the wisdom Clara had already demonstrated through her own family reconciliation. Finally, he penned a careful response to Samuel, acknowledgement of the painful distance between them, cautious willingness toward reconciliation, honest terms establishing that genuine trust would require rebuilding rather than simply assuming. Samuel's reply arrived within weeks, considerably warmer than Jack had anticipated. expressing genuine regret about believing the rustling accusations so readily, acknowledging that considerable maturity and reflection over the intervening years had taught him better judgment about family loyalty during difficult circumstances. "I should have trusted you more thoroughly," Samuel wrote, regardless of how convincing the accusations initially appeared. "I'm genuinely sorry, Jack, for the role I played in that painful estrangement, and I hope, given proper time, we might rebuild something resembling actual brotherhood, despite the considerable distance and silence that separated us these past years." "He wants to visit," Jack told Clara, showing her the letter. "Once the estate business properly concludes. Says he'd like to see Silver Hollow, meet you properly, attempt building something better than the painful silence we've maintained these past years." "I think that sounds wonderful," Clara said warmly. "Given how thoroughly reconciliation transformed my own family circumstances, Jack, I genuinely believe similar healing remains possible for you and Samuel both." "Perhaps," Clara suggested carefully, "there's wisdom in extending the same grace I extended toward my own family when Aunt Louisa's reconciliation letter arrived. Cautious openness, without pretending the past, simply didn't happen." Jack considered this seriously, clearly weighing his own complicated feelings against the wisdom Clara had already demonstrated through her own family reconciliation. Finally, he penned a careful response to Samuel, acknowledgement of the painful distance between them, cautious willingness toward reconciliation, honest terms establishing that genuine trust would require rebuilding rather than simply assuming. Samuel arrived in Silver Hollow during early spring, nearly a year after Clara's initial arrival, the reunion between brothers carrying evident tension despite months of careful correspondence preceding this actual meeting. "You look well," Samuel said, studying Jack with careful assessment during their first proper meeting at the train depot. "Considerably more settled than I remember, honestly, from those difficult final months in Kansas." "Silver Hollow's been good to me," Jack said, old wariness evident beneath careful politeness. "Built an honest life here, Samuel. Whatever doubt you and Father once carried about my character." The tension between them remained evident over the following days, old wounds requiring careful navigation, despite genuine willingness toward reconciliation on both sides. Clara found herself more than once offering gentle guidance drawn from her own experience, reconciling with distant family, encouraging patience and honest conversation over simply papering over years of painful silence. "You two need proper conversation," she told Jack privately, after observing several days of careful, surface-level politeness between the brothers. "Not simply polite avoidance of the actual history that separated you. Whatever healing you're hoping to build, Jack, requires genuine honesty about what happened, rather than pretending it simply didn't." Jack recognized the wisdom in this, and that evening, he and Samuel finally engaged in the difficult conversation both had been carefully avoiding. Raw discussion of the rustling accusations, Samuel's readiness to believe them, Jack's hurt at his brother's lack of faith, the painful silence that had followed his departure from Kansas. "I was frightened," Samuel admitted, emotion evident in his voice. "Father's anger, the community's suspicion. I was young, Jack, and I chose the easier path of believing what everyone else believed, rather than trusting my own brother properly. I've regretted that choice considerably these past years, though I lacked courage to properly address it until this inheritance situation forced reconnection." "I needed you to believe me," Jack said, old hurt finally given voice. "That's what hurt worst, honestly. Not simply the accusations themselves, but watching my own brother choose easier assumption over genuine trust." "I know," Samuel said, "and I can't properly undo that failure, however much I wish I could. All I can offer is genuine commitment toward rebuilding trust properly, going forward rather than repeating past mistakes." The conversation, difficult as it proved, seemed to genuinely clear considerable tension between the brothers. And by the time Samuel's visit concluded a week later, something resembling actual brotherhood had begun rebuilding. Between them, imperfect, still cautious, but genuine in a way that mirrored Clara's own experience reconciling with her aunt months before. "Thank you," Jack told Clara, once Samuel had departed for his return journey to Kansas, "for encouraging that honest conversation, rather than letting us simply maintain polite, surface-level avoidance throughout his entire visit." "I recognize the pattern," Clara said gently. "Having navigated similar reconciliation myself, I understood how tempting surface politeness can feel, compared to genuine, difficult honesty. But genuine healing requires the harder path, Jack, whatever discomfort that path initially demands." A full year after Clara's desperate arrival in Silver Hollow, spring returned to the valley with the particular, golden warmth that had witnessed so much of her transformation, from robbed stranger to established telegraph operator, from cautious courtship to genuine marriage, from painful family distance to careful, hard-won reconciliation extending even toward Jack's complicated Kansas history. It was during this anniversary season that Clara shared news that filled their small home above the telegraph office with unexpected joy. "I visited Dr. Fletcher yesterday," she told Jack one evening, unable to fully contain her smile. "It seems our family's about to grow, Jack Calloway." Jack went very still, disbelief and overwhelming joy warring plainly across his weathered features. "You're certain?" "Quite certain," Clara laughed, watching him process the news with the same overwhelmed wonder she'd witnessed during so many significant moments these past months. "We're having a baby." He swept her carefully into his arms, spinning her once with barely contained joy before setting her down with sudden, protective gentleness. "A baby," he repeated, wonder evident in his rough voice. "Clara, we're actually going to have a child." The news spread quickly through Silver Hollow, the community that had witnessed their entire courtship rallying with genuine warmth around the announcement. Louisa wrote immediately with excited plans for an extended visit once the baby arrived, while Samuel's response carried genuine joy alongside hopeful mention of visiting again soon, properly building the uncle relationship he was determined to establish with his future niece or nephew. It was during one particularly clear evening, the two of them walking together towards Cedar Ridge Overlook, the same spot where Jack had first mentioned his hopes for permanence months before, that Clara found herself reflecting properly on the full journey that had brought her to this moment.